My name is Rivera. I'm formerly from the ADE as the K-12 Science Specialist. I'm working with the ADE to assist with science professional development as these new standards have rolled out. They need just a little bit more manpower, so I've signed on to help. And you can now find me at Mesa Public Schools as their secondary science specialist. Okay, so today we are going to cover Tool 3 of the 5 tools and processes for translating our Arizona science standards into instruction. And I said this at the beginning of Tool 1, this is not the only way to write units or to go about writing units. This is just one way that is very organized. So if you are having a hard time with how broad the standards are and finding what information to teach from the standards, this really organizes your thoughts for you in a really nice way. And all of these resources are free that I can share with you. So that is one reason why we decided to share this one with you, but I just want to make sure that you understand that if this model doesn't fit for you, it's okay, but it is a way to organize your thoughts. And today we're going to focus on using the 5E instructional model to develop a conceptual flow. So last time we really talked about how organizing your standards and creating that coherent progression was really important, and now we're going to look at really trying to figure out exactly what resources we want to find to fit our blueprint. And this was developed by BSCS in partnership with the American Museum of Natural History and West Ed. And the Museum of Natural History is the site that keeps all of these resources for you for free. There's no password or anything. You don't even have to enter your email address. They are just on the site for free for you. So the last time we went over Tool 1, and we used the Arizona Science Standard to plan a unit of instruction by creating this 3D unit blueprint where you took your standards and you put them in the order that made the most sense. Also really did a deep dive into the learning progression, and you have a really good understanding of what students should know. And then you attached your science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts along with the lens of using science to that blueprint. So now you have a good idea of what your unit should look like. We are not going to do a webinar on Tool 2, but it is very important, and that is creating the evidence of learning specifications so that you are backwards planning and you have your end goal in mind. What does it look like in the classroom, and what is your evidence that students have learned the standard, and you get that in your mind first before you start Tool 3, which is what we're going to talk about today, and that's going to be using the 3 dimensions and create a storyline about a phenomena that's going to drive your entire unit. In Tool 4, we have our learning sequence outline, and that includes the resources that you're going to use to teach your unit. And lastly, in Tool 5, you'll go back to those evidence of learning specifications, along with everything you've developed in Tools 1, 3, and 4, and create your final 3D assessment. So it's going to cover all 3 dimensions. This is just a reminder of what Tool 1 looked like after the end of working with my teachers, and this was for 3rd grade. And 3rd grade only has 8 standards. And the way that they broke this down was they kind of looked at their year, and they decided where are they going to start in their year for their standards and where are they going to end. What made the natural learning progression for them. And it could be different at every single district or even in different classrooms, whatever's comfortable for the teacher and how they feel that they want, the direction they want to take their students. Then they broke it down into units. So these 2 standards create 1 unit. This standard is a unit all on its own. And we have our 3rd unit, 4th unit, and 5th unit in 3rd grade. And in high school, this looks a lot different because there's a lot more standards. But that is basically what the blueprint looks like. So you can see the mass amount of work that we talked about in Tool 1. I just wanted to give you that reminder before we start Tool 3. And the purpose of Tool 3 is to introduce and deepen teachers' understanding of how powerful storylines and phenomena can be along with the 5E instructional model, which is a research-based approach to designing instructional sequences within a unit. You will also analyze today 2 classroom scenarios. And as you review the scenarios, you're going to gain a deeper understanding of the 5E model and how it incorporates the 3 dimensions of learning that is required by our standards. So by using the 5E model and your unit blueprint from Tool 1, you're going to develop a really good storyline and conceptual flow that aligns with our new standards and provide an integrated approach to instruction while laying the groundwork for Tool 4, where you're going to find your resources. So how would you describe your classroom and the factors that guide your decisions about science teaching and learning? Kind of give me an idea about what guides your decisions about what students should learn about science in your classroom. And I'm going to give you a second to type in the chat box while I troubleshoot some issues for a couple participants. Susan, yes, the Tool 1 webinar, we are, it's recorded. It's not on the website yet because I just finished that series on Thursday. And that one will eventually be up on the website. But we are also going to be doing this series again so you can hear it live over the summer. And we're definitely going to do Tool 1, Tool 3, Tool 4 in order. And we may do it a second time. Good. So you want to make science instruction apply to your lives and make it relevant. Good. Backwards planning, have your end goal in mind. Understand what students need to know and be able to do before you begin planning. You really want your classroom to be hands-on. Good. Having those unique learners and having alternate ways to present that information. Good. I'm glad you're seeing that the connections with the new standards are very hands-on. They give you a science and engineering practice right at the beginning of the standard, right? Yay, I'm so glad your classroom's inquiry-based. Good. You need to understand students' prior knowledge. Maybe understand what vocabulary students need to be using as they are working on those hands-on activities. Looking at the phenomena and letting that drive your unit, great. Okay, and just a real quick check. Did anything change with my audio? Can you guys still hear me loud and clear? Okay, good. I'm glad, Michelle. Thank you. So good. You guys got the main factors in that you start with the standard, You need to backwards plan and know what your students need to know before you begin, and you are going to be hands-on, use inquiry, use your students' prior knowledge, and all of those really important things that you guys said need to go into your unit. So things that we consider as we are building our unit on top of everything that you said, but that we really need to focus on the core ideas that the standards are built around. Our science and engineering practices that are listed at the beginning of almost every single one of our standards that makes science hands-on, the cross-cutting concepts that help students make those connections to other domains in science, as well as connections to their math and English courses. And then that phenomena piece is going to become really important today, where you have this main event or idea that really engages students and makes them want to learn, makes it real life, drives the entire unit and is interwoven in every lesson throughout the unit. And we're going to talk about the 5 E's today. So hopefully after the end of today, you'll feel like you have deepened your understanding of the BSCS 5E instructional model, and it will help you support for you for planning the instruction and assessment aligned with our Arizona Science Standards. And you're really going to get to see today that coherent storyline about a phenomena and see how the conceptual flow of these lessons are aligned with the Arizona State Science Standards. I am going to send you a link in the chat box, and I'm going to have you read Classroom Scenario A. So we're going to learn about the 5E model and three-dimensional science instruction in the classroom by analyzing 2 different lessons. And I'm going to start you off with Scenario A. If you were able to access the Google Drive and you already have it downloaded, fantastic. I'm going to put the link in the chat box for all of you. So that you can download it and look at it. Now, when I do this with teachers, I give them quite a bit of time to analyze these lessons, and I give them chart paper, something that looks similar to this on the screen, and I have them chart, or I have them first read the scenario and highlight in yellow what the teacher is doing, in pink what the student is doing, and underline what the science of the lesson is. And then I have them chart, and I break up the scenarios into different, so there's 7 lessons on there, and I might say Group 1, please do lessons 1 and 2, Group 2, do 3 and 4, and I break it up. And I have them chart what the teacher's doing, what they highlighted, what the students are doing, and what the science was. And then I have them do a gallery walk, and they get the picture of the classroom as what the teacher is doing, what the students are doing, and what is the science. I don't have that much time with you in a webinar, so I'm going to give you 6 minutes. Please just scan Mr. Cole's Scenario A, and if you need to, jot some notes or just get an idea. What is the teacher doing? What are the students doing? And what is the science in this lesson? Someone let me know if the link worked for you and if you were able to access Teacher A, Mr. Cole. Okay, fantastic. Since you guys are able to access the document, I'm going to put 6 minutes on the timer. Okay, and 6 minutes are up. Like I said, I would normally give participants about 15 minutes for this part of the activity, but for time's sake, hopefully you have an idea of what Mr. Cole's classroom is like, and how would you describe his classroom? What is the feeling you get from reading about his classroom? Okay, so it's teacher directed. He is doing a lot of the work for kids that they could be doing. He does definitely have some good strategies, but maybe the kids aren't as engaged as they could be. Mr. Coles is definitely doing a lot more of the talking, and the students are being quiet and they're writing down a lot of stuff. It's not very hands-on. The students aren't interacting, they're not collaborating. He is definitely working harder than the kids. So there's lots of writing. I'd like to say that Mr. Coles is not a bad teacher. He's not bad at all. He definitely has his own style, but it's more of a traditional classroom. He could be very well liked by his students. They might feel comfortable in this classroom because they know what to expect every day. He's very routine. He's very organized, very structured. But the students aren't really collaborating. It is definitely a teacher-led classroom. And he is doing a lot of the work. We are going to do the same thing for scenario B. And if you were able to download Scenario B and save it, go ahead and open it. I'm just going to ask you to do pretty much the exact same thing. Get a feel for Mrs. Rivera's classroom. And as you read the article, I'm going to give you 6 minutes. And tell me, what is the teacher doing? What are the students doing, and what is the science in this lesson? Keep those in mind as you are reading it. If you need to take notes, feel free. Again, I'm going to mute my end so you guys can read without hearing me breathe in the background or click my mouse. And go ahead and start. And some of you have already guessed. How would you describe Mrs. Rivera's classroom? And go ahead and keep these two scenarios handy because we are going to reference them a little bit more as we continue our webinar today. No, this was created by BSCS and the American Museum of Natural History. It just so happened that they picked someone with my last name. Ah, thanks. Good. You see Mrs. Rivera as a facilitator. The students are using evidence-based argumentation. She's building on prior knowledge. She has a very cohesive storyline going. She's doing lots of formative assessments, checking the students' knowledge, making sure they're getting it before she moves on. Right, and Mrs. Rivera's lesson is not perfect, so she is still providing a lot of the information, and we don't know the background of her school. Maybe they do not have computers for the students, so when she is giving them their research, maybe she has to provide that because of the type of environment that she is teaching in. But she is having the students do the data analysis of what she gives them. The feeling of the classroom is more student-led. The students are doing the science. The students are engaged in her lesson and with one another, so they are collaborating. Both Mr. Coles and Mrs. Rivera ask a lot of questions. Good. Mrs. Rivera uses essential questions to guide every lesson, and each lesson may not be one day. So a lesson may take 2 or 3 class periods. It is a middle school lesson, so they probably have that 1 hour where they travel to each class, or they have an hour block within their day, and it could take several days to teach one lesson. Now, was there anything that was an aha for you when you read the lesson? Like anything that was just either new or a takeaway or something that connected everything that we've talked about so far from the 3 dimensions of the standards to Tool 1 to now? I know for me, when I read it, it was the very first time that I had seen an example of an entire unit, not just a lesson, but a unit in how it flowed from beginning to end. Oh, good. You saw some cross-cutting concepts in there and patterns and how that flowed throughout how that flowed from lesson to lesson. And she really did do a good job of incorporating the science and engineering practice of models. And it wasn't something completely that anyone couldn't have thought of. It was, instead of giving them a worksheet of a food web, let's give them something that they can manipulate and move and change and revise in the form of those cards, right? Good, and she interwove yellow stone throughout her entire unit. And it flowed from lesson 1 through lesson 7, and it wasn't overdone. It wasn't killed to death in the beginning of the first 2 lessons, so it stayed fresh and interesting for students, even at the end. Good, and she used questions and evidence and claim, and I love that you said it in that order, because students need to understand the evidence before they can write their claim and be able to reference what they understand from their evidence before they write their claim. So thanks for putting it in that order. So as you read Mrs. Rivera's lesson, hopefully you saw that this unit was very integrated in the fact that she did some laboratory or hands-on experiences with other types of science learning, including lots of student discussion. There was reading, there was writing. She had to do a few little mini lectures to make sure that the students were getting it, but it was more of kind of summarizing what the student learned versus delivering information. The students were definitely engaged. They were doing research, and they were gathering and analyzing all of that data and creating those graphs, and they were the ones constructing the explanations. The explanations were not handed to them. And from working with my teachers, this one was a really hard one for them. They were like, it was so hard, and they said that they had to stand back a lot and really say, I am not giving the student the answer they want. I'm letting them construct their explanation and telling me what they've learned. And that was a big aha for teachers in my district. And the formative assessments are embedded into the instructional sequence so that they can be used to promote self-reflection about students' thinking. And when doing this, going back to Tool 1 in that blueprint, it's really important that those instructional materials are designed with clear standards and science and engineering practices in mind to get to that level that Mrs. Rivera got to. She couldn't have done it without having that blueprint in her mind already. Those learning experiences are really sequenced into the flow of the classroom of science instruction, so you can see how Lesson 1 flows into Lesson 2, flows into Lesson 3, building on each other. And she really thought about those science concepts, the disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts, as well as having students interact with those science and engineering practices. And also, another really important part is that students get to reflect on what they're learning. They get to talk with their classmates, and they get to engage in argumentation, scientific argumentation, and come up and really build those ideas off of each other. Now I want you to kind of just go over the BSCS by the instructional model, and I'm going to go over it a little bit quickly so you guys can go back to the Rivera lesson. So first we have, in the BSCS instructional model, we have an engage, an explore, an explain, an elaborate, and an evaluate. Real quick, yes or no, did this entire 5E model happen in Lesson 1? No, good. This was an aha moment for me as I was being trained by the people who created the 5E model, was that it is not done in an hour's class period. They had an engage lesson. They had an exploration lesson. They had maybe 1 or 2 explanation lessons. And they had an elaborate lesson, not moment in the lesson, but an entire lesson developed on that basis. I'm going to give you about 1 minute to just read the description of each of the 5 E's. Correct. I agree that our evaluators definitely need some training, and I know Sarah at the ADE is really thinking about that and is putting together something for administrators from the state level to help them see that this isn't that how science now needs to build on each other. Jessica, if you were able to access that Google Drive folder that I created, if you see Tool 3 handouts, this is a page in that packet. I'm going to go ahead and skip this question for time's sake, and I'm going to guess that you guys saw that Mrs. Rivera was the one using the BSCS 5E instructional model. But I do want you to go back to Mrs. Rivera's lesson, and on your own, kind of like label which of the lessons or which of the phases. Which one was the engage? Which one was the explain, explore? And just go ahead and take about a minute and see if you can label them and pick them out. Okay, can we agree that lesson 1 is the explore? The engage. So sorry. Can we agree that lesson 1 is the engage? Then it gets a little bit difficult. What is the lesson 2? What are students doing in lesson 2? Yes, they're going to explore. Now, what about lesson 3? Explain. Okay, what happened in lesson 4? What did students do in lesson 4? Okay, so I have a vote for elaborate. Did anyone this is tricky. Did anyone else have a different vote? What were they actually doing? So the official answer from BSCS is explore more. And then in lesson 5, they explained again. And they did that purposefully because they wanted to see that if students needed more information, you can go back to explore and explain as many times as you need before you get to elaborate with the Adirondacks in the lesson and then the evaluate. And the phenomena in Mrs. Rivera's unit was the reintroduction of the wolves in Yellowstone. And here's just a good quote from the framework. So our science standards were built with the thought that students are going to grow their scientific knowledge from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade And those grade band knowing sciences are hit in every grade band very purposefully, and also the way that the students engage in the science and engineering practices start in kindergarten and definitely develop into more sophistication as they get to 12th grade. And starting with Tool 1 and the blueprint, you start that coherence where you are very purposefully organizing instruction to promote student learning. Reading Mrs. Rivera's scenario helps you see how that can be used in the classroom. And Mrs. Rivera definitely developed a storyline. And that helped promote student engagement and motivation. And she used a phenomena. And I know we didn't talk about it as much here as I would have liked to. But choosing that phenomena of Yellowstone was so important to her entire lesson. And National Science Teachers Association has a free phenomena website where you can kind of get ideas for phenomena to help build your lessons. And in your handout packet, there is this template here for you to put in your Tool 3 template. So in Tool 1, you have your blueprint, and there was a template for you to fill in the information for that. For Tool 3, there's also a template, and it does have the 5 E's listed on the side, along with reminders to add in your anchor phenomena. The reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone impacted the ecosystem in expected and unexpected ways. An area for you to write your guiding question. You're going to be thinking about your core ideas and your cross-cutting concepts, your science and engineering practices, and a place for you to list resources that you find to help teach your guiding question, keeping your anchor phenomena in mind. So again, this is another organizing tool to help you build your lessons. Here is the explain, explore. They did explain, elaborate, and evaluate. As the ending question, before we start our question and answer section, what do you think will be your greatest challenge in planning lessons using the BSCS 5E instructional model? And what are the similarities and differences between using the BSCS 5E instructional model to guide your classroom practice and what you are doing now? Just something you can take away from today's webinar. Good, so you see that maybe there's a different template that you could be using that helps you think about these ideas. You guys really see the natural flow that the entire unit has. That wasn't just a lesson you read with Mrs. Rivera, it was the entire unit. And as you use the BSCS model in your classroom, you can see how it helps incorporate those 3 dimensions into your lessons and keeping your students engaged. And when we go over tool 4, we're going to kind of look at what is an explain, what is not an explain, what is an explore, what is not an explore, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into that with tool 4, because you want to be able to use your template to select resources, so you really need to understand what an explain and an explore is, as well as I'm going to be giving you some rubrics that you can check your lessons to, and it will help you understand if the lesson matches an explore and explain and fits the needs of your lesson, or if you need to tweak it a little bit, or if it's so far off, maybe you could use it somewhere else or just toss it. But it kind of helps you evaluate what you already have and gives you an idea of how to tweak what you have to meet the needs of our new standards and following these processes. I agree, and talking to teachers, honestly, their greatest challenge is not just giving students the answers and letting them discover on their own. And when I challenged my teachers to do it, they were a little afraid, but at the end of the process, they understood how important it was for students to talk to each other, and they were just blown away by what the students can do and what they said. And even their most challenging classes, they said they were still off task a little bit, but where I would normally just be barking orders at the students when I asked them questions, they actually had answers for me. So even though the classroom setting still wasn't perfect, they felt that the students had a better idea of what they were learning. And I know that the first is on Monday and this is coming up, but I'm hoping that maybe we can get a little bit of time. But if you are a middle school teacher and you are interested in doing this process more and actually developing units not only for you and your site, but for all of Arizona to share as some examples, and Arizona Science Teachers Association, in partnership with BSCS, we're actually going to bring down the trainers and fly them to Arizona, and they're going to help us create middle school units 6-8 as good examples of full units. APS Foundation is funding the project, and the program is open to 60 middle school level teachers. All districts statewide. Create a team of about 3 to 5 and apply. And if you can't come up with a team, just email Sarah at the ADE. Maybe we can still figure something out. Right now, there is not a talk for high school level. The thought is that if enough districts get their people in for 6th grade, then those people can train either elementary or high school. But just because I say there is no talk now doesn't mean there wouldn't be any talk later. But this is a year-long commitment. If you sign up for this, it is 1 year. But at this time, I have been putting a lot into the folders, and I will add the template that you can write on for the 5E unit planner. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email her at any time, and if she needs to contact me, she will. I know it is 10 a.m., so if you need to go and enjoy your Saturday, please feel free to do so. Leave the event. If you want me to hang around for a couple more minutes and ask me some questions, I'm more than happy to stay. Mindy, right now, speaking from a district level, the state cannot recommend any resources because the state can't provide them. We have local control. But from a district point of view, there are some great resources from National Science Teachers Association. They are not free, though. I mean, they do have some stuff on their website when you go to their teacher section and their resources. They do have some, but then there are some that you can purchase. And because NSTA has been working with the framework for a while, they are aligned to the cross-cutting concepts and the science engineering practices, which helps. Our standards are unique to Arizona, and that kind of makes it a little bit more challenging to be able to find those resources. So one thing that I loved about BSCS was that they, like we'll talk about in Tool 4, is how they give you that option to look at what you already have and tweak it to. All right, well, I'm not seeing any more questions heading my way. So with that, I wish you, the last two in here with me, a wonderful weekend. And we'll be starting Tool 4 shortly.